What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stuckey.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wondergoal, the soccer betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me, as always, BJ Cunningham and Sam Ingram from bettingexpert.com. And together, the three of us are going to go through all 10 Premier League matches coming our way this weekend for match week 2. We'll take a little jaunt around Europe, talk some championship, and give out our 3-leg underdog parlay. This week is coming in at 131-1. And then give out our favorite bets for the Premier League this weekend. Right back into it, gents, and right back into it at the top of the show with Manchester United. They are essentially a pick'em against Brighton on the South Coast. Brighton plus 150 on the three-way line at Bet365. Manchester United plus 162. The draw here is plus 270. I would have been floored if I saw anything otherwise, but Sam, all three of us are in lockstep here. I think that the value is on the home side, which is not a surprise at all.
Yes. Hello, Michael. My first bet for the pod is, Brighton Asian Handicap 0.0. Can get that around minus 110. So I said on last week's podcast that Fabian Hertzler might be set for a baptism of fire in English football. And they've come out the other side winning 3-0. So he's turned up with 2 fire trucks on either wing in Mitoba and Minter. And they run Everton ragged on the whole. Danny Welbeck looks like he's getting better somehow, despite his advancing years. And they've got a lot of really good options on the bench too. And they've started the season in a similar vein to how they navigated their preseason friendlies. I think Everton were unlucky. They had an offside goal disallowed at 0-0. They had another chance, which I think was going to be ruled out for offside in Dwight McNeil. And there were also a penalty for Dunk's challenge on Calvert-Lewin. Just wanted to get your opinions on that, because I think it was a penalty. I think that should have been a penalty.
Yeah, but I knew it wasn't going to be as soon as they went over it. Everton has.
How do you overturn it if it's a penalty on the field? That's my question.
Yeah, well, it's Everton. That's how it is.
Like, if he didn't call that a penalty and they looked at it, I get maybe saying, hey, no penalty, let's just stick with the call. But they called it a penalty on the field.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I would say You're right. Like, they were unlucky, but Brighton, full value. Like, running all over the place.
That's true. So, I just wanted to bring it up because the defenders slid in, put his foot there, and then, he's made Calvert-Lewin fall over. I just didn't get that. And then the ref's gone to the sideline, didn't watch a replay, and still overturned it. So, that is very Everton. But I just feel like this Brighton front line is going to cause all sorts of problems for United if they click into gear like we saw at stages in the Everton game. It's the first game of the Hertzler era at the MX. If they're as good off the ball and on the board, then they will get their chances. If you look at that first goal specifically, when Mitoma receives it on the edge of the box, turns, carries it through the furs, lays it off to Minter, who then gets down the wing before Mitoma sprint towards the back post and then scored. It was so impressive. If that happens against United, they will cause all sorts of problems against that midfield. Minter went off with what looked like a head injury. I think he should be okay here. He seemed really disheartened to go off, so I think he should be fine. He looks like a great pickup from Newcastle, who I think had to get rid of him due to PSR concerns. Brighton opened as the underdogs in this game, but that's since changed. It is still a pick 'em, but they are slight favourites now. So that's a good sign for anyone fancying a home result here. And interestingly, Brighton are actually a bit of a bogey team for Man United. United have lost 43% of their Premier League meetings with Brighton, so 6 out of 14, and that's their highest loss rate against a single opponent in the competition's history. So the 0.0 Asian handicap effectively draw no bet. That shifted from evens to about minus 110, and I still think that's a nice play with the draw on our side, so I'm happy to take that.
Yeah, I'm with you here. If you picture this match in your mind, like you can just see Brighton swarming and United just suffocating basically and not being able to cope. And it'll come down to whether or not like the 3 or 4 chances that United can catch, if they go in or not. So I'm happy to bet Brighton here at home, BJ. I think that this is a really good bet to start the show.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the first 20 minutes or so for Brighton against Everton wasn't that great. I think they kind of struggled to figure out Herzler's system, but once they did, they were doing a lot of things to Everton that I haven't seen very many teams do. They were, essentially it was splitting the center backs. Wyford was a single pivot. It was a lot of different build-up formations and a lot of trying to keep Everton guessing. But the main point of what they were trying to do is stretch Everton's defensive block, because Everton is so good at denying teams at playing through the middle. They wanted to stretch their defensive block, and they kept getting the wingers in 1v1s, whether they were inverting or going wide, and they were just running them ragged. And that's where I think Brighton can really hone in here against Manchester United. Dalot is a great defensive center back. Mazraoui is not. He's great in build-up. He's a great passer. He's great at getting forward. He's not the defender that Aaron Wan-Bissaka, for example, was last season for United. So him going up against Matoma, who is probably one or two top 5 dribbler in the Premier League, that's a very bad matchup for Manchester United. The other aspect is, I know United created over 2 expected goals against Fulham. I don't think they were really that good. If that sounds, I don't know if that sounds bad, but their biggest chance came at the end when the game got stretched and Garnacho had a wide open goal and they just didn't score it. But the press really wasn't that good for large stretches of the match. Like, they were still very hesitant. It was like the same old United where the press was kind of hesitant and Fulham was able to kind of play their way through. First 20 minutes of the match, Fulham was actually holding 57% of the possession and United really hadn't had a chance. And the one thing that Brighton's going to do defensively that I think is going to cause United a lot of problems is they're going to play a high line like they did against Everton. And with United not having Højlund in there and having whether it be Xerxes or Bruno Fernandes playing as a false 9, those are not the type of strikers that you just play balls in over the top to. Like, those are the type of strikers you drop deep and build up. So I don't really think it's that great of a matchup here for Manchester United. And you mentioned as a bogey team, Sam, the 4 matches that Ten Hag's been in charge at United against Brighton has won 3 of the 4. The one that they lost was on the final day last year when it was De Zerbi's last game, and they had absolutely nothing to play for. But Brighton has won the expected goals battle in all 4 of the meetings that Ten Hag has been in charge against Brighton. So I'm with you guys. I like Brighton draw no bet at minus 110.
Yeah, it feels like this matchup, especially it coming early in the season, is like tailor-made for Brighton here. All right, let's move on to Everton. We already talked about them a little bit, but they're taking on Spurs. Spurs at home is a hefty minus 240 favorite. Everton traveling plus 550. There are bigger numbers out there too. And the draw here is plus 375. BJ.
We're back.
Yeah.
We are so back, man.
I don't want to do it, but the price is just too good. Like, the price is good.
This is crazy. Here I'll start off with this, and then we'll dig into it. But just purely expected goal differential last season through the entire season. Both teams sustained injuries. Both teams went through bad periods. Everton minus 1.2, Tottenham plus 4.8. There really wasn't that big of a difference in the underlying metrics between these two teams, at least showing what the odds are right now. And if you go back to the 2 meetings between them, first meeting, which was at Spurs, Everton won the expected goals battle 1.8 to 1.5, had 31 touches in Tottenham's penalty area and took 18 shots. Second meeting was one of my favorite matches, I think, of the Premier League season last year, Michael, because Everton created 2.6 expected goals, I think, entirely off of corners. And they just exploited Tottenham again and again and again off of set pieces. And what says they can't do the exact same thing here in this match? I mean, Tottenham was 3rd worst in terms of XG allowed per set piece last season. Leicester only got 2 set pieces against them. That Leicester match was quite interesting because if you watch the first half, that looked like the Tottenham of the first 2 months last year. They were like suffocating Leicester. And I was screaming at the TV, just play the ball long, Steve Cooper. Stop trying to build out of the back. Just route one against these guys. And you saw them kind of do that a little more in the second half. Leicester applied more ball pressure. They started to play more transitionally. And they started to exploit some of Tottenham's weaknesses, which obviously we already talked about set pieces, but they're not that great of a transition defense. And when the press doesn't close down, they're way too aggressive, and you're going to have numbers against them in transition, especially in wide areas because they build out in that 2-3-5. And that's exactly where Everton's going to go. They're going to get the ball out wide, and they're going to send in crosses. They're the more physical team. So I don't think that Tottenham should be this big of a favorite. So I got 2 bets here. Both teams to score at minus 150. I think both teams Tottenham is a very aggressive team offensively, and the way that Brighton was able to exploit Everton, I think Tottenham can do very similar things with the way they invert their fullbacks. And I also like Everton plus 1.5 at minus 145. I really think that Tottenham is severely overvalued. And we're also looking at Tottenham potentially having a midfield of kids, Archie Gray and Berbagal. Excuse me if I mispronounced that, because Bentancur's hurt and looks like Basuma's not going to be back in the lineup. So that's troublesome against a team as physical as Everton. So,
yeah. And it also kind of plays into the thing I would be most concerned about with Everton going into this match, which is the middle of the pitch has been a little bit haphazard and they've had injuries already. So with that advantage kind of taken out of the book, I do think Everton has some value here. I don't think that they're going to win. I'm going to play it, but the number tells you they're not likely to win. But
Braithwaite should be back too for this match, unless he
and they also have
moved somewhere.
Jake O'Brien on the bench too. Like there's options in the middle of that back line, so I'm not too worried about the Everton like personnel in the back. It's just going to come down to whether or not they can handle themselves in the middle of the field. Sam, I know you're not as bullish on as us on Everton here in this match, but like, how do you get to Tottenham at this price? Considering, is it just based off what we saw last weekend from Everton and the score line? Because it does seem like this thing is a little exaggerated.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just not brave enough to take Everton on. That's all it is. I'm not having a bet on this one. I don't want to take Tottenham at the prices. I'm just a bit of a coward for taking Everton. Just that opening game from Tottenham, like how Spursy was that? Like they've absolutely killed me. That was I had a bet in that game on Monday night. Tottenham on the Asian handicap, and 35 minutes into the game, Spurs had registered 9 shots to Leicester's 0, 9 corners to Leicester's 0. Each chance that came in was squandered. I knew exactly what was coming. We've seen it 100 times in recent memory. And Leicester did exactly that. Vardy pegged it back to 1-1. The expected goals and the underlying data will tell you that this was a close game, but I'm not having it. Spurs were good, but they were wasteful. Ange will have been fuming, I'm sure. You've seen pictures of him on the sideline, almost looked like he was about to cry. I'd expect Tottenham, I'd expect there to be some kind of response. I think they're going to create chances, which is why I'm a little hesitant to take Everton on. They should win the game, as the odds suggest, but at the prices, minus 150 odd for the win, I won't be taking that. I kind of like minus 105 for both teams to score in over 2.5 goals. I think we might see a few goals. I think Tottenham are there for the taking at times. Like BJ said, they do press aggressively and leave themselves exposed. And I kind of like Everton on the counter. I think they're quite a good transition team. So I would expect Everton to score. I would expect them to have a chance or two. It's whether they take it or not. So maybe minus 105 for both teams to score in over 2.5 goals. But that's more of a lead than anything.
Yep. And of course, make sure to bet your Richarlison anytime goal scorer now that he hasn't been sold yet. So if he's still kicking around at Tottenham,
Everton should bring him back.
Yeah, they really should. Miss him. All right, let's move on to the biggest favorite on the board this weekend, which is Manchester City. They are minus 1,100 on the three-way line at Bet365, taking on newly promoted Ipswich Town. 18-1 for the Tractor Boys, and the draw here is 11-1. I actually was kind of impressed with Ipswich, all things considered, against Liverpool. How much of that is just the kind of adrenaline and the atmosphere being back in the Premier League after so long. And obviously Liverpool has a new manager, so you catch them in that situation. Nonetheless, I thought the first, 40-ish minutes, right around halftime, right before halftime, it started to feel like the game was going the other way, and it was a matter of time before Liverpool ran away with it. That said, you go from Liverpool to City to start your Premier League. It's brutal. And we noticed this last season with these quote unquote like huge underdogs, right? This price is too short on Ipswich. We used to catch 25-1 in these situations with a newly promoted team against the best team in the world. And now it's 18-1 and everything's going to be correlated off that. It's just not long enough in terms of like true odds. So begrudgingly, I'm gonna pass here. I'm root on for the chaos, but not too much that interests me in this match at all, Sam.
Same, really. I just wanted to get a couple leans out there because I know people like backing the big favourites in some way. Ipswich didn't disgrace themselves against Liverpool. They had a few chances, pressed really well in the first half. Liverpool struggled to get out at times, but I think that was always going to be tough to continue for the 90 minutes, especially against that Liverpool team. We might see something similar this weekend against City until City eventually grinds them down, you would think. I feel like Ipswich, I feel like they'll give Premier League teams a really good go this season. Amari Hutchinson looked bright. Sammy Smolitz came on for 15 minutes, their new signing. I think he'll be a good player in the Premier League. Calvin Phillips showed his face on the bench. If he can work his way back to the Calvin Phillips we saw at Leeds, then it's some signing, but that's a big, big if. And obviously he's unavailable for this visit as well as his parent club, Man City, comes. He goes and plays against, or should I say, Ipswich goes and plays against Man City. So obviously he'll be unavailable. City 1.09 at the Etihad to get the win. So the last time City opened at that price, it was versus Luton Town last season on the 13th of April. The Asian line was minus 2.75 that day, and it's currently minus 2.5. And they won 5-1. So maybe there's a little bit of value in that if that's anything to go off. You could also look at City to win both halves. That's at minus 120. That could be a way into the game if you're looking at a pro City angle at a palatable enough price, or if you think Ipswich can harass and harry and keep City at bay like they did with Liverpool in the first half for the majority of the first half, then most goals scored in the second half is minus 105. So that could be a way in as well. But yeah, in the main markets at the prices, it's probably just one to swerve.
Anything for you here, BJ?
No. I will say this about Ipswich. They went man-to-man for the entire match against Liverpool. And they obviously had the energy and the adrenaline for the first half, and it worked. And they were winning every single duel. And then as the match went on, you saw them start to wear down from playing that aggressive of a pressing system. And that's where Liverpool started completing more long balls and behind, because they obviously have superior attackers to Ipswich defenders. So again, if Ipswich is going to go man-to-man for the entire season, I don't think that's the best strategy, but we'll see how it works.
Okay. Moving on to Palace and West Ham also on Saturday morning. Crystal Palace plus 115, West Ham plus 220, the draw is plus 260. A really entertaining, crazy game from West Ham and Villa on the opening weekend. BJ, I think this price is starting to get me towards West Ham. You're on the other side of it. But Sam and I are out of this one. You're the only one with any conviction. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. So I think that, the core problem with West Ham last season under David Moyes is they were an incredibly passive defensive block, and they were not good in that. They conceded 1.87 expected goals per 90 minutes. They allowed the most box entries. They were bottom of the barrel in a lot of defensive metrics. And to think that everything is just going to change now that Lopetegui has come in, I think is a bit naive, because the core problem with West Ham is because they lost Declan Rice last season. He was everything in terms of ball stopping for them. Edison Alvarez couldn't make up for that. I don't even know if he was even going to play in this match. And you saw in that first match that Aston Villa was able to just play through, once they beat the first line of the pressure, they were able to just play through the middle whenever they wanted to. And the other problem is that West Ham was not winning any of the duels at all. Aston Villa won 63% of the ground duels. That was the highest ground duel win rate of anybody in match week 1. So the core problems of West Ham are still there. Just because you go from a low defensive block to a high block under Lopetegui doesn't mean that they're going to get any better, or even actually they're probably even going to get a little worse if you're defending higher up the pitch. Crystal Palace is a really good build-up team. They played through Brentford's defensive block very, very well. They just couldn't generate the high-quality chances at the end because Brentford's one of the best penalty box defending teams in the Premier League. I mean, Eze had, I think, 8 shots, the most of anybody in match week 1, and maybe 6. But he had the most shots of anybody in match week 1, and obviously Glasner's system is get the ball to your best player and let him create all the chances, which, in the end, Crystal Palace did only create a little bit over 1 expected goal, but they're going to be facing a much worse defensive team here. These two teams played on April 21st. Glasner was in charge. It was when Palace was peaking. Palace won that match 5-2. It was 4-0 at the half-hour mark. You can look through all the numbers. You could say, expected goals was maybe a little bit closer than 5-2. All of West Ham's chances came after they were down 4-0. Palace completely dominated them at home. And what's to say they don't do the exact same thing here? The price is actually the same. From that 5-2 win, they were plus 115, plus 120 in that range, and now they're sitting at the same price. And I think we can sit here today and say that West Ham hasn't gotten any better defensively. So I think Palace is a little undervalued, and I like them at plus 115.
What I will quickly say, Michael, is that I think it looks like Anderson's going to Fulham out of the heart of the Palace defence, and obviously Newcastle is still sniffing around. Mark Gahey, so I suppose you can't be too sure if his head's turning a little bit. So that's a little off-putting. I don't disagree with what BJ's saying. But yeah, he's obviously a big player at the heart of that kind of 3 centre-backs at the back there. So something to consider.
Yeah. So we'll see. We knew Palace coming into the new season would be a little inflated, but maybe they're just that good, BJ, and you'll be right here.
We'll see. Hopefully.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's move on to Fulham and Leicester. A little disagreement here. Fulham is odds on at home, minus 125. Leicester City plus 320 coming off the draw against Spurs on Monday Night Football, and the draw is plus 280. I'm down on Fulham. I still just don't see it, like them being good enough to get the separation needed to justify these odds. Like even at home against a Leicester team that everyone's picking to go down, but I think so much of that is just because of the impending points deduction that's coming. But I just trust Steve Cooper as a manager in being able to adapt and be tough to beat and set his teams up correctly for the situation that they're in, which is, look, they're Leicester City. They're likely to go down. I don't think he's just going to throw caution to the wind and try to go beat teams. Like, he's going to try to scrape out results. And I think Fulham are susceptible to that kind of situation. I don't trust them to score. So I like Leicester here as an underdog, Sam. I know you're going the other way. The other thing is a revenge goal scorer bet, if you want to get in on it, is Bobby Decourt over Reed. Anytime goal scorers, you get a decent price there going against his former side. But I like Leicester here. I just don't think Fulham's good enough to justify this price even at home.
Yeah, fair enough. Just watching that Leicester-Tottenham game, I don't think it was a case of Leicester setting up well, rebuffing Tottenham's advances, maybe Cooper tactically outsmarting Ange Postecoglou. It was none of that. It was simply Leicester, Tottenham being wasteful and Leicester getting a little bit lucky. Tottenham should have gone into half-time at 2-0, and if they had this would have got really ugly for Leicester. And then there's no way you'd be getting a minus 120 about Fulham at home here. 20-30 minutes into the game, the market had already reacted on the Fulham win price here. They started going down. I think they went down to minus 130 maybe. So there was money coming for Fulham, and then Spurs just did what Spurs did, and ended up 1-1, and Leicester got something from the game somehow. I'm looking at this Leicester side, and you've got a Jamie Vardy lacking in match fitness, leading that Leicester forward line. Mavididi started on the bench, which was a shock. So I had a bet on Spurs, like I said. So I was licking my lips. I was thinking Spurs will surely outscore them here. They have to, and they were unlucky. And I think it's similar for me again for Fulham. I just think looking at both teams, Fulham at home, obviously there are some issues throughout that Leicester side. I just think Fulham are going to outscore them. I'm just this is more for me being keen to get to side against Leicester in their current shape before they get reinforcements in, and with the limited threat, I think they might wield in forward areas, and I think we can do so at a pretty decent price. I don't really mind that at all. We just need Fulham to pack their shooting boots, unlike Solanke and company. So that's why I sided with Fulham at -120.
Yeah, we're kind of going about it the same way. I want to take on Fulham. You want to take on Leicester at the prices. So it's funny how that spits out that way. All right, let's move on to Southampton and Nottingham Forest. I don't know if this one makes much sense, the prices here, BJ. Southampton at home, a nominal favorite at +150 on the three-way line. Forest traveling +175. The draw is +240. A draw for Forest in that opening match against Bournemouth. I think now we've seen enough of Forest under Nuno that I'm just kind of impressed with them as just a solid mid-table side. And Southampton comes away with a 1-0 loss. It looks on the surface kind of respectable against Newcastle, but when you dig into it, nothing that I saw from Southampton made me want to bet them at this price, and actually made me want to go the other way. So I'm going to go with Nuno here on the road.
I agree. I think that this is kind of a different situation for Southampton than what they were going to approach against Newcastle. I mean, speaking of horrible refereeing decisions, that red card against Fabian Schär, I mean, if you want to say the game's gone, Sam, that game is completely gone if that's a red card. Yeah. Unbelievable. So Southampton got to, play up a man for 65 minutes of that match. So they end up creating 2 expected goals, all well and good. But I think it was interesting how they conceded their goal right before halftime, because the worry going into it was they were going to turn the ball over to Newcastle's press, and with Newcastle only having 10 men, that's exactly what they did. It was a turnover, easy pass, Joelinton, goal, and then Newcastle was able to sit back and keep them out. But the core problem of Russell Martin, and especially this match against Nottingham Forest, who's going to play a lot more passively, is you can try and overload every phase of buildup, and that's great. But you have to be able to create something high quality off of it once you get to the final third. And I'm not sure Southampton, especially in this match, with how physical and how good Nottingham Forest is in their low defensive block, I'm not sure they have the goal scoring presence to actually threaten them. Adam Armstrong and Ben Brereton are great championship strikers. I think they're terrible Premier League strikers, and especially in this match when they're going to be facing guys who are way bigger than them and way more physical. Nottingham Forest under Nuno. He took over on December 20th of 2023. From that period on, they are allowing 1.32 non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes. That is the 4th best mark in the Premier League, behind only City, Liverpool, and Arsenal. That's how good they have been defensively. They've just been really unlucky because they've had bad goalkeeping play to not to sugarcoat it. So yes, that could do them in here. But again, I don't think Southampton has the goal scoring threats to really punish them. Nottingham Forest, against teams in the bottom half of the table since Nuno has taken over, are only allowing a little over 1 expected goal per 90 minutes. And we know Nottingham Forest is an incredibly dangerous transition team. They have ball carriers and really good transition threats all over the pitch. So I think that they should be road favorites here. And if you want to look at it from a mathematical perspective, teams coming up from the Championship to the Premier League see a -1.1 decrease in their expected goal differential per 90 minutes. So Southampton, as good as they were in the Championship, they didn't also light the world on fire and, get close to a 1 expected goal differential per 90 minutes. So they're going to be around, a -0.4, -0.5 type of team. And Nottingham Forest under Nuno has been a positive expected goal differential team. So even if you account for home field advantage, Nottingham Forest still should be a favorite here on the road. So I don't agree with the price. I agree with you, Michael. I like Nottingham Forest, draw no bet at +110.
You with us here, Sam?
I think so. In my head, I'm just thinking pass for most of these games, which is not what you really want on on a betting podcast. The thing that kind of concerns me is I know they were against 10 men, and I was so against Southampton in our season preview show, but I thought they played pretty well. Like, I think they knocked the ball around pretty well, and I think they probably, like, going on the underlying numbers, they should have put a 10-man Newcastle team to the sword. But I think that's what Russell Martin's football will do to you, will do to the eye test. You have a look at it and think, you know what, they're this pretty decent team. They're good on the ball. They're largely press resistant. They like to knock it around and get through the thirds. But are they going to be clinical enough against this Nottingham Forest team, which should find the net once or twice? Maybe not. BJ's made a great argument. I think Forest should probably be favourites just about. So therefore, that suggests that there is value on Nottingham Forest. If I was to enter this game, it would probably be on the Asian handicap line. But in terms of a bet for myself, I've put down pass because I just wasn't too sure. I want to see another game with Southampton involved. Now they're at home as well, so that'll be good to see. I just want to see another game, 11 versus 11, and just see Russell Martin ball as it should be. So yeah, it's just a pass. I just want to take a watch and brief, really.
Okay, that's the 10 a.m. Eastern time kickoffs wrapped. So let's move to 12:30. I think you would call this the match of the weekend. Villa and Arsenal at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. Dinner time over there for you, Sam. Villa plus 333 at home. Arsenal traveling minus 134. The draw is plus 280. I think two sides that are looking to win games in very different ways. And for me, that's always good news because it leads me to think the game could just get really ugly, right? You got one side who's just looking to keep things tidy and in control on the ball, and Arsenal, the other side, and Villa trying to play a little more frenetic, introduce some chaos to the game. And when those contrasting styles meet, I think sometimes the game can struggle just to get going. Like I think there's a longer feeling out process when you have two teams, especially if they're both very good, going at it just from completely opposite ends of the spectrum. I think the 0-0 is very live here at 12-1. Like, Arsenal is so stout defensively and will want to just kill the game, and Villa wants to do the exact opposite. So you're going to have one team just trying its best to get the ball and keep it moving. The other team just trying to take the sting out of the game for like 60, 70 minutes before trying to win it. I don't know if I'm crazy here because Villa like tends to not go in this direction. But when you have two sides just so different and they're good at what they do, I think it becomes interesting. So I'm going to play the 0-0 at 12-1, Sam. I don't know what your thoughts are on this game as a whole, that bet. But what do you got?
I think you are a little bit crazy, but I kind of like it. It's fine. Don't worry about that. Well, I thought BJ, I had a sneaky suspicion he might be going for an Arsenal win, so I just wanted to offer up some resistance to the Arsenal fan on this podcast. I'd like to put up the Aston Villa Asian handicap. So last season, Villa was the best team to back in the Asian handicap market in the league, more profitable than any other side, especially when playing at Villa Park. They returned a healthy 24.3% ROI if backing each handicap with a 1 unit stake. So if you think Aston Villa can score against Arsenal here at home, and bear in mind, they averaged about 2.53 goals per 90 at home last season. That's exactly the same as Arsenal at the Emirates. Then Arsenal will need to score 3 goals at Villa Park for us to lose all of our stake here if backing the plus 0.75 Asian handicap. So Villa did the double over Arsenal last season, accounting for 40% of Arsenal's Premier League defeats. That was 2 out of their 5 defeats. So in my mind, I'm not sure whether, and BJ will probably disagree with me, whether Unai Emery has Arteta's number a little bit.
Oh, he does.
Yeah,
no doubt about that.
And he's a great coach. So like, I'm not. It's not the most outlandish of claims, but I think Arteta may be going into this game with that in his mind as well. And I'm curious to see whether he tries anything a little different to try and get the better of him. So that'd be interesting to see. But Villa are the only side to beat Arsenal in the Premier League in 2024 after their 2-0 victory in April. Arsenal have won 17 out of 19 games this calendar year. So to be getting Villa at home plus 0.75, I know it's difficult to go against this Arsenal team. so good defensively, really impressive up top, got players that will hurt you in an instant. So I get that, but I thought there was a bit of value on that for Villa.
Yeah, I'm going to take my Gunners at minus 125 now. The price is rising. Projected them at minus 143. Both meetings against Aston Villa last season. The first meeting, again, scored in the 7th minute. Villa kind of sat back, and Arsenal created, close to 2 expected goals and just couldn't find the back of the net. Kind of the same story in the second meeting. They completely dominated the first half, had a couple golden chances. The one that got saved off the line. And then as the game went on, Villa kind of grew into it. They got a couple chances and they ended up scoring twice. But over those 2 meetings, Arsenal combined for over 3 expected goals, and Villa didn't even get to 1.5. So I think if you look at the underlying data, Arsenal was the better team in both meetings and probably should have won. But the thing in the second meeting that I thought was a lot better from Arsenal, at that midway point, if you remember, when Villa won against Arsenal, they had recently just beat Manchester City because, with Unai Emery's high line, compact 4-4-2, it takes away the space in between the lines. And so it basically forces you to play balls over the top. And City and both Arsenal weren't willing to do that against them. The second meeting, Arsenal was willing to do that. They played a lot of balls in behind, and they actually had a lot of success doing that. So the one thing that's worrying about Aston Villa from last season, not only they overperformed their underlying metrics, but they were a really bad defensive team against good offensive teams. Against the top 8 offensive teams by expected goals, Aston Villa conceded 1.84 expected goals per 90 minutes. And overall for the season, they were 19th in big scoring chances allowed, with a lot of those big scoring chances allowed to those top 8 offensive teams. So I think Arsenal is going to be able to control this match both in possession and both out of possession. I kind of worry about Onana in this match. Douglas Luiz was so important to Aston Villa's buildup. In terms of his ability to, as the guy dropping deep in the double pivot. Onana's obviously got crazy potential, and I think he could be just as good as Luiz maybe in some time. But in the second match in a new system facing the best out-of-possession team in the world is a little worrying. So I like Arsenal. I think there's a little bit of value on them. The price is rising, though, so I wouldn't play Arsenal anything north of minus 125, which is kind of interesting. So, but we'll see. But yeah, I like Arsenal minus 125.
Villa did play 3 0-0s last year across all competitions, by the way. Ajax, Chelsea, and Everton. All right, we'll flip it to Sunday. Some good kickoffs on Sunday this weekend. But before we get there, just a reminder that Wondergoal is proudly presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary. Bet365. You must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, Ohio, North Carolina, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. And if you or anyone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, please call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. All right, BJ, you're alone on this one too. This is the classic. No matter what bet I would make, I feel like in this match between Bournemouth and Newcastle, it would lose. I've got no feel for it at the prices. Bournemouth plus 200, Newcastle plus 120, the draw is plus 280. I would like to have been able to bet Bournemouth here, but the price just isn't good enough. They are getting a ton. Maybe everyone who bets soccer is listening to our preseason previews and was like, yeah, I like this Bournemouth team too.
I don't hate a bet on Bournemouth. If you're going to take them, I'd just go straight up on the money line. Yeah. I wouldn't try to play like a high price on, plus half a goal, which is, we're sitting at Newcastle plus 120 and the plus a half on Bournemouth is sitting around minus 145, which is kind of a high price to pay. So I projected Newcastle at plus 140. It's going to be a barren defense for Newcastle on Saturday. Fabian Schär is suspended. Lascelles is injured. Botman's injured. Lewis Hall or Lewis Miley, I can't remember which one, is also injured for this match. So it's going to be some type of makeshift back line, which is kind of concerning for Bournemouth. We'll see if Evan Nilsson gets his first start here for Bournemouth. If he does, I think that obviously favors Bournemouth. But I think the more interesting aspect of this game is these are two teams that in my opinion, are in the top 5 or 6 in terms of out of possession, pressing, causing other teams problems. Bournemouth is a decent build-up team. Newcastle just wants to play direct all the time. So it'll be interesting to see who controls more possession, who tries to control the ball more, when the reality is both these teams are just way better in transition. It could create a very back and forth type of game, which would favor, a high scoring affair, potentially even an over. But the total is priced pretty high here. So for me, if I was going to bet anything, I think because of Newcastle being barren across their back line, I think that there is a decent amount of value here on Bournemouth if Evan Nilsson starts. But again, I think this is just an interesting match to see who wants to control the ball more, because I don't think it's advantageous for either team to control 50% of the ball here. I think it's advantageous for both teams to look to press high, cause those problems, and play in transition. So I'm probably going to pass unless we see some steam here on Newcastle. But if I were to play anything, I think Bournemouth money line has a decent amount of value.
Okay. Now that brings us to a relegation 6-pointer. Wolves and Chelsea. both being propped up by Everton and Ipswich. Wolverhampton at home plus 350. Chelsea's minus 138. The draw is plus 300. At first glance, I thought the price isn't big enough on Wolves. And the more and more I think about it, the more and more I like it. It just seems like this Chelsea team is, maybe I overstated or overestimated just how much talent can make up for. It just seems like a mess, Sam. Like I think you have to take that stuff into account, especially early on in the season with the transfer window not closed yet. It really does seem like nobody understands what the vision is here. And when you're playing a plucky team on the road like Wolves, good manager, a guy who knows how to beat big sides. He did it all last year, especially in the early going, Gary O'Neill. This Wolves price starts to speak to me a little bit more.
What is going on at Chelsea?
Joao Felix now in.
Never seen anything like it.
Honestly outrageous. You got Chilwell and Sterling being forced out. Gallagher's gone. Chalobah and Chukwuemeka too. They're on the cusp that Chelsea want them gone. It's not good. You can only imagine what the squad harmony is like in that rather large dressing room. And I've been in changing rooms before, obviously nowhere near this level, but when you've got people that aren't playing, when you got players where the manager's rubbing them up the wrong way, when you've got players sulking, etc., not giving off a good vibe, being half-arsed in training, it rubs off on others, and it's really not good for the harmony of a dressing room. Sterling's one of the older heads in that team. He'll have good friends in the squad, obviously, and now he's training away from the first team with the younger lads. It's not the best recipe for a new coach in a new division who's trying to get a handle on this rather bloated squad, that's for sure. So there's a lot going on at Cobham. Now they go away to Wolves as minus 139 favourites. I don't think I'm having that. I can see why the Wolves Asian line will appeal to people. That's at plus 0.75 at minus 105 on Bet365. The concern for me in backing against Chelsea this season is that I do think they come good eventually, like they did last season under Poch. There will be a time where we see team cohesion, where we see relationships on the pitch forming and being effective. There will come a point where this leads to consistent performances as a whole, I'm pretty sure. But I don't think that'll be soon. But I do think we're going to see the odd game where they are convincing and we sit up and take note because they have that individual quality, like you said, Michael. That's my concern in getting against them, because I feel like we will see that in the odd game. However, and I said this on the Betting Expert podcast this morning, if you're going to bet against Chelsea, it feels like this is the time to do it. Side against them whilst they're a little undercooked, whilst Maresca's dealing with all the nonsense that's raining down on him from above in terms of ridding big characters from his squad to comply with PSR. And I think the new idea is get people in on reduced wages, longer contracts, and get those who's earning the big bucks, get them out of the squad. So really, the powers that be, they're just looking at this on a spreadsheet pretty much. They're not really taking into account what these decisions are going to do on this to the squad. and whether Maresca's going to be able to handle that. So if we do see a bad run from Maresca, I'm pretty sure the owners are just going to be like, what's going on here? Why, like, where's the results? Where's the positive results? And I wouldn't be surprised if they sack him in 10, 15 games. It's just a shambles, really. But yeah, anyway, for me, there's enough to suggest that this Wolves Asian handicap is worth a tickle. If Wolves score, like we said with Villa, then Chelsea need to get 3 away goals away from home for us to lose the full stake. So Wolves are actually the second best side to back in terms of Asian handicap betting in the Premier League last term, behind Villa. Wolves won 20.5 of 38 Asian handicaps. So looking at them against Arsenal, they were fully in the game at 0-0. They were still in the game at 1-0 down. They didn't play like 14-1 underdogs, and I can hazard a guess that they won't feel like the minus 350 underdogs here. They looked bright down the left-hand side with Rodrigo Gomez. It looks like they've just cloned Pedro Neto before letting him go to Chelsea. And I like the look of Mascara at the back, centre-back, who had pinned Havertz down by his neck. So I really like players that play on the edge, like a Diego Costa type player. So it's good to see another one of them in the Premier League. And those two, yeah, they're going to help fill the void of Koeman and Neto, which Wolves supporters are probably rightly concerned about. So at the prices, I'm really not that interested in taking on Chelsea. So I thought Wolves plus 0.75 at home after Gary O'Neill's had his first full preseason with his Wolves team. Yeah, I like the thinking of that.
All right, and that brings us to the last match in match week 2 for the Premier League, which is Liverpool hosting Brentford. Liverpool minus 400 off their win at Ipswich Town. Brentford, a double-digit underdog at 10-1. The draw here is plus 500. Really impressed with Brentford, BJ, in that win over Palace. We talked about it in the lead up to the season. There was a lot of noise in their disappointing season last year that maybe threw some people off, including ourselves, I think, at times last season, from thinking that this is the normal Thomas Frank Brentford team, solid, good against the bigger clubs. I always feel comfortable. Like, there are just some teams that you feel comfortable backing and you trust them with your money. Brentford will always be that team under Thomas Frank for me. I think even as a big underdog, like, this is a huge pressure spot for the new manager at Liverpool, right? First home game. They were good in that second half, but it took them some time to get going against Ipswich. I want to say huge step up, but it is a step up in competition here against a really savvy opponent. I like Brentford here. I'm going to play the money line. I know that most people, if you are backing Brentford, will look to take on the handicap, which you're going to suggest, but it's these odds seem too wide, given what we've seen from Brentford already in just one match, what we know about Brentford under Frank, and the fact that this is a heaps of pressure situation for Arne Slot and Liverpool.
I was thinking back, Michael. Since the inception of this podcast, have we ever not taken Brentford in this match?
No, this is the.
I think we did
set
it every
and forget
time.
it match.
Yeah, set it and forget it type of thing. Yeah, I think 2's a little high in terms of a spread here. I think Liverpool should be closer to minus 1.5. Like I mentioned with Ipswich, Liverpool was struggling for the first 45 minutes because they weren't winning any duels and they weren't completing any long balls, and there wasn't some type of magical tactical change that Arne Slot made. They started playing more aggressively and they started completing more long balls as Ipswich was wearing down. First half, Liverpool completed 42% of the long balls. Second half, 63%. And they also won 64% of their aerial duels, which now you're going up against Brentford, who scored the most goals off of headers last season. They're a great aerial threat. They're really, really good defending in a low defensive block. They're not going to play like Ipswich did. They're not just going to go man-to-man and press you. They're going to slink back into their 5-3-2. They're going to deny space through the middle, and they're going to force Liverpool to beat them with crosses or to beat them through the middle, which I'm not so sure Liverpool is going to be able to consistently do and create high-quality chances. The thing with Brentford that why you can always just kind of back them, not just because they're good in that low block defensively, but they have a lot of speed and a lot of threats in transition. When they lost to Liverpool in the second meeting last season, Brian Mbeumo didn't play in that match. They were starting Ivan Toney and Neil Maupay up top. Brian Mbeumo is their best player by far out of anybody. He's such a good transition attacker. You saw that scoring the first goal against Crystal Palace. He's going to give Liverpool a lot of problems. And the other thing about Brentford is they are one of the best set piece teams in the Premier League, and they've been like that for such a long time. Last season created the second most expected goals behind only Everton off of set pieces. Liverpool really wasn't that good of a set piece defense last season, 16th in XG per set piece allowed. You saw Ipswich's best chance in the match come off of a set piece. So Brentford's always going to have advantages there against Liverpool. So I think Brentford is definitely live here. They definitely have the defensive structure. They definitely have the transition pieces, and they definitely have an advantage on set pieces. So I think Liverpool is a little overvalued here. Only projected Liverpool spread closer to minus 1.4. So I like Brentford +2 at minus 130.
It'll take some time, Sam, but eventually this kind of match we'll get you on side to be back in the bees. You'll be fully immersed in the Thomas Frank experience, but nothing for you as of yet.
No, not quite yet. The opening game for Liverpool, BJ mentioned it, was typical game of two halves. Ipswich turning up first half, brimming with confidence, feeding off that adrenaline. They outshot Liverpool in terms of XG in the first half. That changed in the second half. Slot took off Yarrow Kwanzaa, who he said wasn't winning his duels, brought Kanate on, and then they turned the screw. They played more expansively, used the width, and then in the end ran away with it. Their class shone through. It was a good debut for Slot, if not perfect. Coming into this fixture, I just don't like the prices. Brentford +2 is semi-appealing, but the price for me is dwindling. I can see why you'd like it. Even Tony will likely be missing again. Brentford cope without that against Palace at home, but this is obviously a different proposition, of course. It's an uphill battle without a main man up there, a real focal point, and it will be hard enough as it is at Anfield. Liverpool at minus, what are they? Minus
400, yeah.
Yeah, minus 400. It's too big. It's too short.
Yeah.
The handicap at minus 1.75 and the goal line at over under 3.5. Nothing too appealing there. Maybe both teams scoring over 2.5 goals. That's at minus 120, but that also doesn't excite me too much. So I've passed.
Okay, that's the Premier League wrapped up. We'll move on to Europe and talk a little championship as well. Here, BJ, this will be for you. La Liga, 6 draws.
We're back.
Opening. Yeah, this is the La Liga we've grown to love and loathe.
Oh, yeah.
Anything in Spain for you?
Well, along those
Just
same
draw
lines,
round robin.
No, let's just take an over, right?
Okay,
Along
perfect.
those same lines. Sevilla Villarreal over 2.5 at minus 120. Two of the worst defensive teams in terms of expected goals last season, both in the bottom 5. Both teams good in transition. Both teams can't defend in transition. And Villarreal also should have a pretty good advantage here. One of the best set piece teams in La Liga, second in XG per set piece, while Sevilla was dead last in that defensively. So, projected well north of 3 goals. Both meetings, the first meeting had 3 expected goals. The second meeting between these two had 4.8 expected goals. So I think over 2.5 minus 120 is a tad short. I like that there. Bundesliga. Let's kick things off Friday. Leverkusen -1 plus 105 against Gladbach. They did it again, Michael, in the German Super Cup. They were down a man for 60-odd minutes or so against Stuttgart. Patrick Schick comes on, 88th minute equalizer. They win on penalties. That's just never going to stop. But here's what I will say about Leverkusen. Are they going to get double-digit, stoppage time equalizers and winners this year? Probably not. But the underlying data on them is still really, really good. Plus 1.27 expected goal differential per 90 minutes in the Bundesliga last season. Xabi Alonso, for my money, is one of the best tactical managers in the entire world. They're so difficult to play against. You either have to sit in a low defensive block, just kind of delay the inevitable and hope that Leverkusen doesn't score, or you have to do what Atalanta did to them in the Europa League final, which is just intensely press them man-to-man. But not every team is Atalanta out of possession. Not every team can do that. And Gladbach definitely can't do that because they were terrible defensively last season. Leverkusen combined XG in the 2 meetings against Gladbach last year, 4.8 to 0.6. They completely annihilated them in both meetings. So I think they're going to do that again here. So -1 plus 105 to open things up in the Bundesliga. And then Serie A, Fiorentina, Venezia under 2.5 at even money. Palladino comes in at Fiorentina while Vincenzo Italiano moves on to Bologna. Things don't really change though at Fiorentina. They, in terms of like ball progression last year, I've spoken about them a lot, but they were really good at building through the first 2 or 3 phases of buildup. And then once they reach the final third, that's where things tend to fall apart. And that happened in their first match against Parma. 2 shots with an XG rating over 0.1. They took a ton of shots, just a ton of low quality ones, and they're going to continue to do that. Venezia was a very good defensive team in the second division of Italy last season. So I think that total is a little too high. So under 2.5 in Fiorentina and Venezia.
Okay. That's Europe. Let's go back to England now into the championship. A couple plays here. Sam, we'll start with you.
So yes, Blackburn versus Oxford over 2.75 goals. And both Blackburn Rovers and the new boys, Oxford United, they've approached the new championship season with a fearlessness in front of goal. The wave that the newly promoted club is riding in Oxford is a dangerous one for any side they're going to come up against right now. And I can imagine few will enjoy playing against Oxford in the opening months. And not many would have expected this start from the home team in Blackburn. They were looking awfully light in forward areas before like a 72-hour period in the transfer market where they seem to buy about 8 strikers. And now Rovers' new look attack are only pipped by Burnley, who scored 9 in the goal scored stakes after 2 matches. Ohashi has come over from Japan, looked fantastic. Andreas Weimann has a start to life in Lancashire that he'd have dreamed of when he signed. So all in all, quite positive for Blackburn and Oxford too, but it hasn't looked overly assured defensively. And either side sit in the top 10 for expected goals against after their 2 championship matches. Obviously a small sample size, but from the eye test, from everything I've seen, if there were 2 teams in the second tier to pit against one another to encourage a high scoring game, I think this pair would edge it. I think I'd pick these 2 out of the 24. So I've got this down as over under around 3.0 goal line. So for this to open at 2.5, it was something I had to play.
And of course, congrats to you and Wayne Rooney and Plymouth Argyle for getting your first points on the board in the new season. BJ, anything in the championship?
Well, I kind of like Plymouth this weekend, but I didn't want to,
don't know about that.
I mean, that's a high price on QPR there, Sam, but I'll go somewhere else. How about one of the new boys, Derby County, back in the championship, plus half a goal at Watford on the weekend. Derby had a good result against Middlesbrough. They created a big chance and then held them out for the rest of the match in their second match. They were really good in League One last season, had a plus 0.72 XG differential per 90 minutes. Teams coming up, the barrier to entry from League One to the championship is not as severe as, championship to Premier League or a lot of other leagues around the world. Teams see about a 0.7 decrease in their XG differential per 90 going from League One to the championship. So with Derby County being, like I said, 0.72, they should be around an even expected goal differential team projected in the championship. Watford last season was exactly that. They were just right bare even throughout the entire year. They lost one of their most important players, Ismail Kone, to Marseille. Haven't really brought anybody in significantly to replace him. They've been good in their first 2 matches, Watford has, but from just a data perspective, I think this match should be a lot closer to a pick'em, or even Watford maybe closer to plus 120, giving them home field advantage. So I like Derby County, plus a half at minus 110.
Okay. That brings us on to our underdog parlay. 3 Premier League sides featuring this week, 131 to 1. It comes out to Sam. You can get us started.
So I'm going for Wolves at plus 350. There's a lot going on at Chelsea right now, and certainly not all good. Now they go away to Wolves as minus 139 favourites. There'll be people fancying the home side this weekend at plus 350, and I can see why. As Maresca attempts to get a handle on this talented but bloated squad, perhaps the best time to back against Chelsea this season is nearer the beginning of the campaign, when there's a lack of cohesion and understanding on the pitch and within the ranks in general. It might be a bit of a scrap for Wolves to get 3 points over the line, but they'll be well drilled in their opening home game after Gary O'Neill's first full pre-season at the club, and I would expect them to carve a chance or 2 against this new-look Chelsea outfit under new management.
Yeah, I fully endorse that one, and the more and more I think about it, the more and more I hear you talk about it, I like it more. I was deciding between Brentford and Leicester. I'm going to go with Leicester here, play it a little bit closer to the vest here, maybe get us off off and running. I just don't think Fulham is good enough to warrant these odds. I know there's a lot of concerns with Leicester City going into the season, but I do trust Steve Cooper, especially against a side that I just don't think that the gap is as wide as these odds suggest. BJ, what about you?
Well, I'm not going to play close to the vest, Michael. Everton 6-1 on the road at Tottenham. The underlying data last season showed that the gap between these two teams wasn't really that large. Tottenham had a plus 4.8 expected goal differential. Everton was at minus 1.2. Even in the two meetings that they faced off against each other, Everton won the expected goals battle in both meetings. And in fact, over the course of two matches, created well over 4 expected goals. It's because, especially in that second match, they have a massive advantage on set pieces. We've seen Tottenham under Ange Postecoglou struggle defending them. 17th in XG per set piece allowed last year, whereas Everton created the most expected goals off of set pieces and created over 2 expected goals purely off of corners in that second meeting. Everton's a good transition team, which is something that Tottenham really struggles with, especially defending those wide areas. So I think Everton is very live, considering that the underlying data suggests they maybe should have won both matches against Tottenham last season. So I like the Toffees at 6-1.
There you go. Everton, Leicester, Wolves comes out 131-1. Okay, on to our last segment of the program. Our favorite bets for the Premier League match week 2. BJ, what's your favorite bet?
Nottingham Forest draw no bet plus 110 against Southampton. You know, Southampton was playing up a man for about 65 minutes against Newcastle. And of course, they looked great. They were moving the ball well, created close to 2 expected goals. But this is going to be a much different opponent. You know, Newcastle's a team that likes to press high. Nottingham Forest is a team that's going to sit in a low defensive block. And they're going to make things very, very difficult for Southampton, who I'm not sure really has the physicality or the strikers to actually threaten Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest, since Nuno has taken over, is only allowing 1.32 non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes. That's the 4th best mark in the Premier League, behind only Liverpool, Arsenal, and Manchester City. And in fact, since Nuno's taken over, they actually have a positive expected goal differential as well. So this is a very, very good team that's just gone through a really bad period of unluckiness, for lack of a better term. Whereas Southampton is a very vulnerable team in transition. So if Nottingham Forest is able to win the ball, which they should be able to in their own final third, they're going to have a lot of transition opportunities against Southampton here. And I think they should be a road favorite rather than a road underdog. So I like Nottingham Forest, draw no bet at plus 110.
All season long last year, we talked about the defensive deficiencies of Manchester United. And one team that I would not want to face while I'm trying to sort through those issues is Brighton. After what we saw in match week 1 from the Seagulls on the road, I think Brighton is well worth a bet here at plus 150. I think they give United plenty to think about in their own half and should run away. I was close to making my best bet, the 0-0 in Villa and Arsenal, Sam, but I'm going to make it Brighton here. What about you?
Well, although Michael keeps talking down my best bet of the week, I'm going for Fulham at minus 120. This is more getting against Leicester than getting Fulham on side. I can see the visitors struggling to create more than Fulham away at the Cottage. The underlying figure from Leicester's opening game against Spurs will suggest it was a fairly even showing on the expected goal stakes, but the eye test will have told you a very different story. Spurs were wasteful when it should have been out of sight by half-time. If Leicester arrive in a similar fashion and be as easy to play through as Leicester were against Spurs, and I think this Fulham side can take advantage at minus 120, which I think is an attractive enough price at home for me. Marco Silva's men won 9 out of 19 games at home last season and returned the 3rd highest ROI in the 1x2 market in the Premier League if placing a 1-unit stake on all home games. So I like the look of them here.
All right, that does it for match week 2. We'll be back again next week to get ahead of match week 3, and then a nice little international break after all the soccer that we played to get things started in the Premier League. So for BJ and Sam, our sponsors Bet365, and our producers Noah and Matt and Dave on the back end, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again in a week.